adjustment. Just by chanting, one will get the effect, or even listening. So this mantra goes, unfortunately it's not on the board.
Everyone has cards.
Okay. Hare, everyone can repeat. Hare. Hare is the energy of God. And Krishna means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Sanskrit, it was all attractive. Someone can say, Krishna.
Krishna.
And Rama means the highest pleasure. It's another name for God. So there's a call to the energy of God and to the Supreme Lord to raise us to the spiritual platform of consciousness. That's called kirtan. Kirtan is a recommended Ayurvedic process. It's found in the Ayurvedic scriptures. There are two major Ayurvedic scriptures, actually three, but the two most famous authoritative sources of Ayurveda, one of them is called the Charak Samhita, which gives an outline of all the general principles of Ayurveda, and the other is called the Shushruta Samhita, which gives the outline of surgery in Ayurveda. And then we have Vibhaga, who gives Hridaya, Astaya Hridaya, which gives Astanga Hridaya, two different books, which gives also general principles of Ayurveda, but is more modern than Charak Samhita. Charak Samhita says, in order to purify the mind of the toxins that are in the mind, the best method is kirtan, to chant the names of God. And the best way of purifying our food, what we eat, is to eat food offered to God, to Krishna, or Jehovah, Allah, whoever you want to call him, offered with love and eaten with love. That's the best way of eating food. So today, we'll go over some more of the principles of Ayurveda. Today we're going until 2 o'clock. We'll take a break at 11:45 till around 12:15. Then I'll demonstrate some of the principles of exercise, namely the type of hatha yoga that I do, which is called Iyengar hatha yoga, but actually it's all the same. But some of the basic principles from that and from another type of yoga, which is White Lotus, where they more or less define some of the principles in a different way that Iyengar uses. Namely, lines of energy, wind through the instrument, and playing the edge, which is the same principles that Iyengar uses also, but different language, that's all. So we'll go over that. How many here practice some kind of yoga regularly? Any particular style? We ask that. Hatha? Here's that. Anyone practice any other besides Hatha?
Shivamukti.
Shivamukti. Oh, well, that's similar to White Lotus. That is.
Sometimes a little Kundalini.
Yeah, Kundalini is like a little bit like Vinaya yoga, kind of like a flow series. That's the Yogi Bhajans.
Yeah.
That type of Kundalini.
Yeah.
Okay, and then anyone here practice Tai-chi?
Well, I don't practice it.
What's that?
Qigong.
Qigong.
Yeah, Shibashi.
Okay, so I've been practicing Yang style Tai Chi.
Oh.
It's simple, the simplest of all. My teacher is in Perth. He's from the original Yang family. One of my teachers, at least. So he dates back, his family dates back around 1,000 years or something. He lives in Perth right now, so every year I go there, I practice with him and his group. And my other teacher lives in Poland. He's coming from another family. So I'll show you a little bit of how Tai Chi relates also to Ayurveda, and how yoga relates to Ayurveda. It's all related. It's all part of one big happy family. But in any family, people fight also. Not always a happy family, but it's part of the same family. So yesterday we went over something about what the elements are, how they relate to the food that we're eating, the different tastes, sweet, sour, salty, pungent, astringent, and how those relate something to emotions. And here it has something more about the attributes of air, the attributes of fire, the attributes of water. So these are rather technical. The problem with giving a seminar which lasts for 2 days is that our minds get filled up with all kinds of information, And if it gets filled up too much information, it just wants to spit it all out. So rather than filling your minds up with a lot of varieties of information, hopefully we can get some of the basics down so that we can apply it a little bit in our lives rather than just all these technicalities. In other words, if we understand or assimilate these principles, then it all becomes very simple or simpler. And if we get a lot of information, a lot of facts, then it becomes very confusing. Matter of fact, if you read the Ayurvedic textbooks, even what Vata is, what Kapha is, and what Pitta is, they have long debates in their texts about what's their understanding of what these energies are. It's kind of like in any subject, people don't get recognized unless they have a different opinion from everyone else. But that won't help us very much. It just confuses us. But here, fire is hot, sharp, light, dry, and subtle. So that's very important. Let's start with actually earth. Heavy, dull, static, dense, hard, and gross. So that's more or less our understanding of earth. Gravitation, downward attraction, sound, touch, form, taste, odor. So within earth are all the different sense objects, or perceptions of senses, sound, touch, form, taste, and odor, physical, mechanical energy. Air is, well, it's like earth, water. Water is cool, liquid, dull, soft, oily, slimy. Downward movement, cleansing, cohesiveness, adhesiveness, percolation, sound, touch, form, taste, chemical energy. So as the gross earth becoming very heavy, if we have too much earth in our consciousness, we become dull. Water is usually equated with love, actually, the binding force that keeps people together. So water is sometimes equated with affection, sneha. And we'll find a coloration in that. When we go over the dhatus, we'll find out that fat has a lot to do with the consciousness of sneha, or affection. Sometimes when people are fatty, they're a lot more calm and they have more affection. The old grandmother is usually pictured as rather heavy set. So fat gives us protection, insulation, and it also gives us some affection. One feels comfortable. It's like being in a cold winter day, being in your bed with a nice warm blanket. Just imagine how that feels, nice and comfortable. Some people walk around with a nice warm blanket around them. Makes them feel comfortable and snug. Fire, sharp, hot, dry, subtle. Brilliance, luminosity, penetration, the radiant flame of intelligence. So when we're dealing with the gross, it becomes more obvious. When we're dealing with the subtle, it's not really that, well, it's not that difficult to imagine how the same fire that burns outside and transforms things also helps us within and transforms our perception of things. In other words, everyone is perceiving, and then there's a transformation of our perception, which is called analysis, and on that basis of analysis, then we discern what's going on. If someone has a very sharp analysis, it means that their intelligence is burning quite brightly. Interesting enough, does anyone know astrology, specifically Vedic astrology here? So in astrology, digestion is governed by different planets, but one of the planets, one kind of digestion is Mercury, which governs one's ability to transform one's immediate surroundings and analyze it and understand what's going on. So if you have a strong Mercury in your astrological chart, it means you can analyze things quite well. And on the opposite, if you have Mercury, for instance, where it's debilitated in Pisces, then everything seems quite confusing. kind of your emotions cloud over your perceptions, rather than your perceptions analyze your emotions and see them clearly. Instead, you see through your emotions. Is that clear? Anyone ever had that experience? You perceive reality through your emotions, especially when they're strong enough. You look at someone, you hate them, and all you can see is through that feeling of dislike. In other words, or if you see your child or your dog, nowadays it's usually the dog. I mean, after all, it's just a dog, but because you see through the eyes of affection, it's much more than a dog. If someone hits you, it's an offense, but if they hit your dog, punishable. So, because we're seeing through the eyes of our emotions. So fire is that ability to see through the eyes of something. The brighter it burns, then the more clearly things are. Just like in the darkness, the brighter the light is, the more everything becomes illuminated. Similarly, the brighter the fire of our consciousness is, the more clearly we see everything. Then we have air, mobile, dry, light, cold, rough, and subtle. Karma is moving in a particular direction. Sound, touch, electrical energy. So it's the air that gives us the ability to move. The muscles don't actually move, by the way. It's the air flowing through the electrical system, you could say, governed by the electrical system, which is pitta, the nervous system, tells the energy of air how to flow. Or another level, our consciousness, we can consciously take our breath, the air within our body, and by our consciousness move it to different parts of the body. Just like, for instance, we all know breathing, when we breathe in, we're just breathing in the lungs. But when everyone can hold their hands out, don't hit your neighbor unless you don't like them. That's just an excuse. So here, let's take these two little pinkies here and just move your arms apart by moving the pinkies apart. Makes life simpler. Now, what do you feel? Do you feel the tips of your big fingers? Now breathe. And take the breath and move the energy from the breath. Move it through the big finger. You feel how by your consciousness in the breath, you can actually feel even more your your middle fingers. If you take that breath consciously and move it through the fingers, see how you, okay, put your hands down. You feel how you become more aware of your middle fingers? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, but did the breath really move there? Or did our consciousness with the breath move there?
Consciousness.
Yeah, it was actually our consciousness, but there was something like air moving there. Isn't that right? We can feel it wasn't just consciousness, because we were conscious there already. There was something more than just our consciousness. There was actually air moving there. So though we're breathing in through our lungs, but there's actually air all over our body. Otherwise, things wouldn't move. There are specifically 5 major types of air. The air that we're using here is called Vyana, which pervades the body. Yes?
Is that similar to your chi?
Yeah. That's the same thing. There's no chi, ki, or prana, they're the same thing. Prana, they're all general energies, by the way. There's no specific energy just called prana. It comes in many varieties. For instance, but that there is an energy, general energy called prana. Just to give an example, when we eat food, say you eat an apple, you're hungry, you're tired, and you eat an apple, what happens? Immediately.
Get a little perky, a little energized.
You get a little energy. Now, was that apple digested? How long does it take for the apple to get digested?
20 minutes.
Well, it probably takes 20 minutes to go through the stomach. What about assimilated into the body?
An hour?
Good luck. It takes a while, more than an hour, to actually get assimilated and go to all the cells, and because there are different states of digestion. But even that 20 minutes, but you get some energy. So where did the energy come from? Obviously, it wasn't assimilated into your body, the apple. But where did the energy come from?
Our thoughts?
No, I mean, if that was true, we just think ourselves into the Olympics. No, actually, there's energy in the apple if it has any taste. When we eat a good apple, you get more energy, right? A very sweet, succulent, ripe apple that wasn't made out of cardboard. Pretty rare, I don't know, maybe they have them in museums now. But if you eat a sweet, succulent apple, which is ripe, then immediately you get more energy. So what is the energy coming from? It's coming from the prana that the apple has. And the taste indicates the fact that it has prana. And the taste buds have the capacity to some extent. Actually, most of it comes from the breathing. In pranayama, there's a space where your nose, this is like the third eye here, there's an area in here when we breathe, it can assimilate prana within the body, in that particular space. It's like when you smell a rose, that breathing that you have when you're smelling a rose, that's where the energy goes to, where the prana is captured in the body through the breathing. So in singing, one of the ways of singing is you sing as if you breathe in as if you're smelling a rose for singing. And your singing has more energy. So when we eat, we're getting prana from the food by tasting it.
Can you spell prana, please?
What's that?
Can you spell prana?
Prana. P-R-A-N-A. General classification. Prana is the subtle form of vata. The essential part of vata, which gives energy, is called prana. And prana moves as vata moves in the body, but vata doesn't give that very much energy. But prana is like the contents, vata is like the container. So the most essential part of vata is prana. Just like the most essential part of pitta is tejas. Tejas actually is what transforms. Pitta is what heats. Agni is what in the body is what digests. But teja is the power behind the digestion or transformation. Therefore, one can have a lot of pitta in the body and have very poor digestion. You can have a high pitta on your score, but that doesn't mean you have a high quality of digestion or assimilation. Because you may have high pitta and low agni or tejas. Similarly, the essential part of kapha is ojas. Ojas, as kapha keeps within our body the different, just like kapha, the skin is kapha, keeps within the body the different energies. So ojas, which is the most essential, the final product of digestion, keeps all the subtle energies like agni, tejas, and prana within the body. Is that clear? So ojas is the essential part of kapha, prana is the essential part of vata, and tejas or agni is the essential part of pitta. Just like you may have a car, but unless you have an engine, it's not going to run. Just the car itself won't do you very much good, although it has some use. Similarly, without the essential energies of prana and tejas or agni and ojas, the body won't work. So ether, clear light, subtle, soft, immeasurable, vibration, expansion, non-resistant, freedom, love, descent of intelligence into the heart of matter, sound, nuclear energy. So although we're not dealing so much with ether, because it's very subtle, but it's essential. By ether strength, that everything else is maintained or held on to. So here's an example of some of the foods that we eat that have different elements in them. Obviously, there's going to be a correlation between the foods that we eat and the elements, or even the dosha. So earth, most kinds of seeds and nuts, meat, mushrooms, root vegetables, beans, wheat, rice, many other grains, coconut meat, hard, dried fruit, minerals. So this is valuable, for instance, if you're vata or you're traveling and you feel kind of ungrounded. Therefore, things that ground us, if we're looking for foods that ground us, they'll have principally earth as their principal constituent. Of course, as we see, seeds and nuts, meat, mushrooms, root vegetables, like potatoes and beets, carrots, they're difficult to digest, heavy foods. So if you're ungrounded, but you don't have a very good fire of digestion, and you eat them, what will happen?
Sleepy and tired.
Yes, you'll go to sleep, and that will make your digestion even worse. You'll probably get sick. Because what happens if you eat a big meal and you're not used to it and you go to sleep? What happens to your fire of digestion?
Shuts down.
Yeah, it slows down. And then what happens? It stays in your little old tummy for a long time, and it turns into toxins, and you get sick. Here we have water, milk and dairy products, juicy fruits such as plums, watermelon, grapes, cantaloupe, oranges, papaya, peaches, coconut water, juicy vegetables such as cucumbers, zucchini, tomatoes, salt, etc. Now, interesting enough, water is next to earth in terms of being heavy. And included within water are fruits, juicy fruits. There we go. Such as plums, grapes. So we may think, for instance, I'm going to fast on grape juice. Has anyone ever fasted on grape juice? Yeah, I fasted a week on grape juice because one of my devotees, they said, well, you have a cold, maybe you should fast on grape juice. Has anyone ever had a cold and tried to fast on grape juice? Well, I did. Guess what happened to the cold? Every day it got worse. Why? Because grapes are very sweet, and mucus is also very sweet. So by drinking the grape juice, I was increasing mucus. Not because mucus is actually a product of indigestion. When food isn't digested, it turns into mucus. It's not that any food that's not digested turns into mucus, not just grapes or milk, but because grapes are actually very sweet, they're quite heavy. And when you make something into a juice, it even becomes heavier because it becomes more concentrated. Therefore, the idea that if you drink grape juice, it's a very light drink. It's not a very light drink. It's actually quite heavy, but because it's not that difficult to digest to a certain extent, therefore sometimes we can get away with drinking grape juice, or even fasting on grape juice. Actually, if you fast on grape juice and you're fairly healthy, it can be fairly cleansing and it's quite nourishing. So one doesn't really feel hungry if you fast on grape juice. The advantage of doing that is that for the liver especially, because it doesn't have to, or for just the digestive system in general, it doesn't have to figure out so much what enzymes to digest the food with, because there's only one food. It's very simple. Therefore, it gives the digestive system a break, a vacation for a little while. On the other hand, if you eat a lot of varieties of foods at one time, then the brain goes crazy trying to figure out how to digest it. There's a point where it won't be able to digest it. For instance, the ideal American breakfast of shredded wheat and milk, toast, and other things that we won't mention, plus orange juice. Has anyone ever heard that? Milk and orange juice. God, it's fantastic. Good combination. You've heard that?
Well, her.
Has anyone ever tried drinking orange juice and milk together? No?
Yeah, it makes the back.
What we used to do.
Makes the back of the throat.
That was the ideal breakfast. Unfortunately, the orange juice, especially out of a carton, is so sour, it turns the milk, it curdles the milk in your stomach. Now, curdled milk is not bad, but when it happens in your stomach, it's not very good. So it's a bad combination, milk and acidic fruit. It's not very good for digestion. And therefore, when the body it gets hit by milk and toast and other things, plus shredded wheat, plus orange juice, what happens? It just shuts down. It can't figure it out to lunch. After you eat breakfast, your brain and your stomach go out to lunch. Difficult combination. Matter of fact, even shredded wheat, as I mentioned one time, they did an experiment and they fed shredded wheat to rats, trying to find out what the nutritional value of shredded wheat is. And the rats, they ate the box that the shredded wheat was in, and they left the cereal. I don't eat shredded wheat, by the way. I don't eat the box either. Here we go, fire. Spices such as hot peppers, black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, asafoetida, hing, garlic, and onions. Sour fruits such as pineapple, lemons, grapefruit, tamarind, and sour berries like cranberries, alcohol, and tobacco. Obviously, this is not a recommendation chart for us. But this is just the qualities that some of these foods or herbs have. Now, if we have a low fire digestion, these are the types of foods that would be recommended. Especially what's used a lot in increasing digestion is ginger in different ways. There are many different ways of using ginger that will, without agitating the fire digestion within the body or the fire in the body, increase our fire digestion. Because we can increase the fire in the body and not increase the fire of digestion or overstimulate the fire of digestion. We want to have a balanced fire of digestion. We don't want to eat food and have such a strong fire of digestion that as soon as we eat it, it turns into ashes. Because there's a purpose of eating food, that it's supposed to be digested in such a way as it can be assimilated into the body and utilized to build the different dhatus, or different supports for the body. But if the fire of digestion is so high, it turns the food into ashes. Well, it's very difficult to assimilate ashes. Try living on a handful of ashes every day and see how strong you get. Unless they're fortified ashes.
Oh, no.
Fortified with all the vitamins. On the other hand, if the fire digestion is not strong enough, when we eat the food, we just get a big lump in the stomach. And we pray to the fire digestion to eventually remove it. So the fire digestion shouldn't be too strong, it shouldn't be too weak. It shouldn't be variable either. One day we're very hungry, especially people with Vata constitutions, they have that problem sometimes if they're not careful. One day they're extremely hungry, they can eat everything. Everyone's surprised how much they eat. And the next day they can't eat anything, they have to fast. Their eyes are bigger than their stomach. How big is our stomach? Does anyone know? Yeah, well, it's not that. If you take two fists together, and you put them together, that's the size of the stomach. So how much food can the stomach hold? About that much, right?
You're American.
Yeah, sometimes actually we stretch it out. Most people, in other places, their stomach is that big. In America, their stomachs are that big. We stretch them. Therefore, we should eat in such a way as that we can digest the food and utilize it properly to strengthen the body, rather than create toxins or obstructions in the body, which will later, as we'll find out, they circulate within the body, they rain down on the weakest areas of our body, and that's where our diseases that we label come from. Actually, disease starts way before all labels of diabetes and arteriosclerosis or gout or whatever else. Disease starts way before that, but by the time we get up to labeling the disease, it's practically too late. Then it becomes much more difficult to take care of it. But that's usually a product of indigestion, where the toxins, along with the doshas, they circulate in the body looking for the weakest part of our body. That's why in Аюrveda, we can predict where people will get their disease or where they'll find their discomfort, because you can see where the weak part of the body is through astrology, for instance. We can go over a little Ayurveda astrology if anyone's interested. Anyone interested in Ayurvedic astrology?
Yes.
Does anyone have their birth time? They know the exact birth time? Okay, so we can use one of your charts. We can go over it, see how it correlates to your dosha test. Air, dried fruits, raw vegetables, rough vegetables such as broccoli, cabbage, and sprouts, nightshades like potatoes, tomatoes, and eggplant, many beans such as black beans, pinto beans, and chickpeas. So beans have a reputation of increasing air. Is that right? You can practically utilize it as a fuel sometimes. And ether, sprouts, fresh vegetable juices, algae, and spirulina, intoxicating narcotic drugs such as alcohol, marijuana, LSD, cocaine, and tobacco. They get you high, really high. Anesthetic drugs such as ether. So those are the things that you really get spaced out on. So every day we're eating food. Do we ever really look at the food and think, what's going to happen after I eat this food?
All the time.
Well, I didn't always, but I do now.
Yeah. What's going to be the effect? Am I going to get spaced out? Am I going to fall in the bed unconscious? Am I going to fly into the air, spread my wings, and say 1,000 things? What's going to happen? The senses and the elements. So the elements are also related to the senses. And these are quite fairly obvious. That hearing is, let's start with smell, is related to the earth element. Therefore, they have something called aromatherapy. Because smell has a big effect on our consciousness. Smell has a lot to do with taste also. So smell, the nose, obviously, excretion. These are the commentaries, the 5 action organs and the motor organs, excretory organs, and the tanmatras, so smell, earth. Taste, tongue, procreation, genitals, rasa, water. So this chart also, vision, eyes, walking, legs, rupa, and fire. So air has something to do with the skin, hands, ether with the ears, and speech. Therefore, speaking can convey all the other elements. The subtle sound can include, or at least a description of all the other elements. On the other hand, earth, within earth, we also have water and fire and air and ether. But within water, we don't have earth, but we do have fire, air, and ether. So the more gross elements contain the other elements within them to a large extent. Perceivably, we should say, because even in ether, there's the potential of earth, and therefore there's some earth there. Because everything comes from the subtle to the gross. It was from ether that air was manifested, and fire was manifested, water from fire, water from water, earth is manifested. So the potential for the more gross elements is there in the subtle. But the manifestation of the element is included within the gross. In other words, the potential is in the subtle and the manifestation is in the gross. Is that clear?
Repeat that lastly.
The potential for the manifestation of the element is in the subtle elements, but their actual manifestation of the potential is in the grosser elements. So the potential that's within ether, we find manifested as air, fire, and water, and earth, to our perception. Now, one who's actually more elevated, they can experience within ether, within sound, for instance, all the other experiences that we have to grossly experience. I'll give you an example. If you close your eyes and think of say, a banana, and then try and taste the banana within your mind, you can taste it, right? Something like it. It may not be exactly the banana you ate yesterday, but you can get an idea of it. So therefore, you're actually experiencing taste. So if a taste is all the way down here for water, there's no water in your mind. Although the mind is more subtle, it has the potential. The taste is potential there, and it can be manifested by experience, by using our intelligence to manifest the taste from the mind. Is that too subtle?
So the potential for manifestation is in the subtle, and then what was the second half?
Then it's manifested to our senses, our gross senses, as it's manifested in the gross objects. In other words, in the mind that we have the potential to experience all the different forms. We can manage forms. We can smell things in the mind. We can taste things in the mind. We can hear things in the mind. So the mind has the potential to perceive all the different experiences that we do with our gross body. But in our present state, we probably can hear with our tongue. Anyone can hear with their tongues? But we can taste with our tongue. So the subtle manifests itself into the gross, and through our gross senses, we can perceive the gross manifestations. Although, believe it or not, there are people who can see with their fingers. And there are people who can do that even with their gross senses. I'm not one of them, but there are people who can do it. Especially we find when people lose one of their senses and their other senses become much more perceptive. Now a little explanation about Vata. Any questions about this so far? We really got pretty subtle there. Vata in the body, Vata principally composed of ether and air, It's a subtle energy associated with movement. It governs breathing, blinking, muscle and tissue movement, the pulsation of the heart, and all the movements in the cytoplasm and cell membranes. In balance, Vata promotes creativity and flexibility. Out of balance, Vata produces fear, anxiety, and abnormal movements.
When you
Yes.
say abnormal movement, could that be like vertigos?
Yeah.
Is that nature?
Or for instance, another abnormal movement is when we have in our body with two principal areas, apana and prana. Prana governs the air going upwards, usually from the chest, upward to the head. And apana governs from the, well, let's say from the belly button all the way up. And apana governs the air is going down. So apana will help us in elimination, in childbirth, menstruation. And prana will help us in breathing, getting energy into the body. Now, when apana can't go downwards because of prana, it's supposed to go downward, but instead it goes upward because of blockage, say, in the large intestine. Say we're constipated, and apana is going upwards instead of downwards. That's an abnormal movement. The result is that usually we feel nauseous. And sometimes you have a bad smell, your breath has a bad smell. So that may be a symptom of apana. Instead of going down and helping us eliminate things, goes upwards. By the way, bats, they excrete through their mouth. So it doesn't apply to bats. Their apana goes upwards. But we're not bats. Pitta, principally made up of fire and water. Pitta expresses itself in the body's metabolic system. It governs digestion, absorption, assimilation, nutrition, metabolism, body temperature, all transformations. In balance, Pitta promotes understanding and intelligence. Out of balance, Pitta arouses anger, hatred, jealousy, and inflammatory disorders. I'm Pitta, by the way, principally. So if you find myself, if you see me getting frustrated and angry, that's why. I have an excuse. I'm just manifesting one of the doshas to the class. Kapha. Kapha is principally a combination of earth and water, and is the energy that forms the body's structure and provides the glue or a cohesion that holds the cells together. Kapha supplies the water for all bodily parts and systems. It lubricates joints, moisturizes the skin, and maintains immunity. In balance, Kapha is expressed as love, calmness, and forgiveness. Out of balance, it leads to attachment, greed, possessiveness, and congestive disorders. Both Pitta and Kapha are oily, and Vata is dry. We've gone over this the other day, but this is a nice way. Dryness is characteristic of Vata. Dryness appears in the body and mind only when there is increase of Vata. Anyone here travel a lot by airplane? Yeah, I do. So you find one of the effects of traveling by airplane is becoming dry. And are you Vata also by constitution? So Vata plus extremely Vata-inducing activity produces extreme dryness. You find your skin getting dry? Dryness is a side effect of motion. You can't get much quicker than an airplane. Dryness is a side effect, which is Vata's physiological function. The unevenness of excessive dryness introduces irregularity to the body and mind. So after traveling on an airplane, what happens usually? Irregularity. They call it jet lag. So it means that one's body functions get thrown off, one becomes tendency towards more irregularity. Both Vata and Kapha are cold and Pitta is hot. So heat is characteristic of Pitta. Heat appears in the body and mind only when there is a disturbance of Pitta. Heat is a side effect of transformation, which is Pitta's physiological function. The intensity of excessive heat introduces irritability into the body and mind. So intense heat will stimulate to the point of becoming irritable. What does lust usually generate after some time? You love someone and then and within a few years, what do you call it? I love you, I love you, I love you, I hate you. It's called anger. Lust is quite a heating up experience. And then if we can satisfy lust, it turns into greed. Just like you have a nice ice cream cone. I like ice cream, by the way. I don't eat it very much. But you get a nice ice cream cone, strawberry. Some people like strawberry here. Vanilla, chocolate. We don't eat chocolate, but in my mind I can, no one will complain. And you eat it. What is the first thing when you start eating the ice cream? The first thought usually, it's disappearing. There's going to be an end to it. Do I have enough money in case I want another one? And then you eat the other one, and what happens after some time? You can't eat another one. And how do you feel? Frustrated. Maybe not to the point of anger, unless you really like ice cream. There's some frustration, because one can't satisfy one's greed anymore. So lust is this fairly heating energy, greed is a little bit more heating, and then anger, that's really heating. Is that right? You can feel the heat when someone gets angry. So that's a side effect of transformation. Intensity. So Pitta people are generally quite intense. We all have a little bit of Pitta, but those who are highly Pitta, they're intense people. They have a tendency to burn themselves out if they're not careful. Are you Pitta? Especially Vata Pittas. Vata Pitta is the most intense. They're the ones who, if they get into something, it doesn't matter what time of the night it is, they just keep on going for it. Their mind says, no, just keep on another hour, just one more hour, another hour. You're almost done, just get more into it. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't worry, you can take some extra rest. They can really get into it. And then what happens, they collapse, and they go into samadhi, and no one knows what, they wonder if anything bad, untimely happened to them. But they're just in samadhi for a few days, recovering from the intensity. Both Vata and Pitta are light, Kapha is heavy, so heaviness is a characteristic of Kapha. Heaviness appears in the body or mind only when there is a disturbance of Kapha. So Kapha is not bad. Is when there is a disturbance of Kapha, too much Kapha, not being timely eliminated. Like Vata is eliminated, there's 3 avenues of elimination for the doshas, along with the byproducts called the malas. So through sweat, what do you think is eliminated? Pitta. Through breathing, what do you think is eliminated? Vata. And through defecation, Kapha. And also through urination, some Pitta and some Kapha is being eliminated. And some Vata also. So heaviness is a side effect of stability, which is Kapha's physiological function. The viscosity of excessive heaviness introduces slowness into the body and mind. So what happens when we eat too much? We slow down. You know, right? You feel heavy. That's why it's not recommended to do intense exercise after a heavy meal. Because the body has to cope with it, it has to digest it, it has to deal with it, and therefore to put another burden of the body working is just like trying to multitask a computer which was 20 years old. Very hard to multitask computers, even the new ones. What to speak of an old computer which keeps on having to reboot all the time. What do they call that when the program breaks?
Crashes?
Crashes, yeah. So our system, if we try and multitask the system which is not capable of doing it, then the system will crash. Sorry to tell you that. Even when we have our Superman outfit on, it still won't make up for it. Attributes. So we only went over 6 of the major ones: heat and cold, heavy and light, and hot and cold. But there are 14 others that are important, but we're not going to go over them, all of them. We mentioned some of them when we went over the Pitta, Vata, and Kapha, which they fit into. So these are helpful to be known, but it's not so easy to remember them all at once. Just like here with the first one, heavy. What's good to know is that heaviness will decrease Vata, decrease Pitta, because both Pitta and Vata are alike. So sweet taste will decrease Vata and Pitta. On the other hand, it'll increase Vata, Kapha, and decrease Agni. Anyone here has ever felt intense hunger? If you haven't, just fast for a day or two. You'll realize what I'm talking about. And if you eat something heavy right afterwards, what happens? It immediately goes down. As a matter of fact, it goes so down sometimes, it goes too much down. Sometimes after a long fast, maybe a week or 2 weeks or even a month, and people will think, oh, I'm really hungry, let me eat. I know some devotees in our movement, they did what's called the board fast. The board fast meant they fasted on herbs and some juice for a week. And then they felt really hungry after the week, after their fast was ended, and they broke their fast with pizza. Yes, it was great pizza. I wasn't really there. It wasn't a very good ending for the fast, though.
Can I ask, I've read in some Ayurvedic books that it's good once a week to give your body a break and just eat or drink liquids. Do you adhere to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's good. It depends, but everyone has a different body.
Mm-hmm.
So for a Kapha person, when they hear that, they think, oh, that's really good. When a Pitta person hears that, he'll think about it. And when a Vata person hears about that, they become afraid. My God, I'm going to starve for a whole day, I'm going to collapse. Kapha person thinks, oh, I really need a break. And the Pitta person starts getting hungry, just thinking about fasting. Then they think, oh, look, if I throw this book away, I don't have to worry about these things. So it depends. Usually, the least amount, if one day a week we eat the least amount possible, that's good. And there's something called satya, somya, and satya. Satya means the quality of adjustment or habit, getting used to something. So rather than freak the mind out and try to give it an austerity that it's not really very enthusiastic to accept, to try to accept some idea which will not be so much different from the body's idea of what it should be doing. and then try it out a little bit. So that after trying it out, the body becomes used to it, realizes that the mind is not going to try and starve me to death. And therefore it cooperates, it feels relaxed, and then it gets into the regime of doing that once a week after some time. That's what happens a lot with people who are fasting, trying to lose weight. It's a whole complicated thing, but basically speaking, the mind tries to starve the body. So the body can fit into what the mind is telling the body should be. And the body reacts by lowering the fat point, the body's metabolism, because it thinks that the mind is trying to starve it. Therefore, it tries to lower the metabolism so that it doesn't starve. It doesn't starve to death. So the body, after some time, when it isn't eating, the body feels like it's starving, then it demands that the mind binge and starts eating. And it's because it's eating, and because the body thinks it's going to be put into a starvation situation again, it starts storing away all the food that's being eaten. So by the end of the fast, you gain more weight than you had before, because the body became freaked out and thinks that the mind's trying to starve it to death. So it winds up storing away more and more fat, and therefore the more you fast sometimes, the more weight you gain, ultimately. On the other hand, some kind of system where you're using your energy up and at the same time replenishing it in a normal way, then the body won't think that the mind is against it or has some conspiracy against it, and it'll cooperate. So there is the mind, there is the body, and there is intelligence, and if they cooperate together, then the body works much better than if the mind has one idea and the body has another idea, and the intelligence has a completely different idea. Is that clear? Just a little summary. You may not be able to remember all these things. Vata is dry, light, and cold. Those are its principal qualities: dry, light, cold. But it's also rough, subtle, mobile, and clear. So Vata people, sometimes they're the ones who are most likely to be like clairvoyant. They're the ones who go into out-of-body experience. Practically their life sometimes is out-of-body experience. They're the least conscious of their bodies. Therefore they can float more or less. Their bodies are lighter. Their joints crack a lot more than others because of roughness. Anyone here is pure Vata or have strongly Vata? Your joints sometimes crack. Yes, you can kind of make music just by coming.
So are there any particular foods that would help with Vata's joints to get?
Yeah, of course. The foods that are like soup. Or for joints, the best thing is oil massage directly into the joint. Properly done, of course. Regular Vatas really need oil. The skin eats food, oil. So directly massaging, say, sesame oil, or in the case of, for instance, a disease such as arthritis. So there's oil is taken. One of the oils that during an attack of arthritis, because arthritis has exacerbation, is that how you call it? It's actually inflamed. Exacerbation, and it has remission. So during the exacerbation, to rub proper castor oil into the joint will somewhat relieve the joint.
Does it mean that you should eat more oil?
If you're Vata,
Yeah.
eat more. Oil is heavy to digest, so you have to be careful what you eat.
How would you give intake in the body to make it less dry?
Oil, you can do butter,
Okay, butter.
butter, some kind of lubricant. I think, yeah, of course they should eat things like dairy products are good for lots of people if they know how to take them properly.
Do you suggest milk?
Yeah, milk which is not homogenized and not pasteurized.
Where do you find that?
On a farm,
Yeah, cow, I got a cow.
the cows do that. Matter of fact, most of the cows' children, will only eat, the calves will only drink unpasteurized, unhomogenized milk. And they're always healthy. Yeah.
Not cold as well?
Yeah, not cold. Problem with homogenization is that it breaks the fat molecules up and makes them extremely hard to digest. And pasteurization makes it extremely heavy, although we ourselves, still we should heat the milk up. Milk is best taken right after, within half an hour after the cow, you milk the cow. Then you don't have to homogenize it, even pasteurize it. But because they put milk on, they want to keep it on the store, on the shelf, sometimes up to a year or two. They have a way of doing genetic engineering. They combine milk with pig genes or something.
God.
It's not his fault.
I know.
So then you can keep it on the shelf for a year. Not recommended. I saw a movie, there was a movie, I forget what it was called. Something about McDonald's hamburgers.
Supersize it.
Supersize it. And they had special McDonald's hamburgers, French fries. Did anyone see that video for the movie? Yeah, so they put the hamburger, they put all the different things that they make underneath the glass. And within a week, you see it turned black, and then green, and orange, and all kinds of, things came out of it. It moved, it talked. And then the French fries, you see sitting in there, a month goes by, it looks exactly the same as the day they bought them. 2 months go by, it looked exactly the same. They could have kept it there until now, it would have looked exactly the same. So you can imagine, you eat it, and it's still in your stomach for years, it looks exactly the same as when you ate it.
Actually, a similar thing happened to me with some bread that I got. It was just regular, like, Sereny whole wheat bread. It wasn't great bread, but it wasn't like white bread or anything like that. And
Sure, what
I got it, and
is it under why don't you turn the camera around? You're on candid camera. Quick.
Anyway, and so I got this bread, and I went camping for the weekend, and then I just put the bread in the back of my car and forgot about it. I think it's there actually. But it was a couple of weeks went by, and I was cleaning up my car, and the bread still looked exactly the same. And it had been a couple of weeks in a hot car and cold car with the changing weather and stuff like that. So I'm thinking I don't want to buy that bread anymore, because if it's not being stored right and it still looks fresh, it's probably not digesting very well at all. So,
Yeah, it probably has so much chemicals in it that even if you put it on the fire, it probably would burn the fire. Probably put the fire out. Yeah, because in order to preserve it that much, imagine how many chemicals they must put into it. Just like tomatoes, you have this huge tomato the size of a watermelon, which is cultivated in a greenhouse. So you can just imagine how much of that is really tomato and how much is chemicals. Then you got this really kind of like multi-shaped tomato, which is like, doesn't have it has dirt on it. You think, oh my God, what is this? No one would ever buy that. But that's a real tomato. And the other thing is just like someone's imagination what a tomato should look like. And they eat it, it's not really tomato, but because they bought this thing, whatever it was, and they think, wow, what a bargain, it's a tomato, But it's not really tomato, it just looks like a tomato. Yeah.
Is it tomato difficult to digest?
Yes, that's a different thing. They have oxalic acid. I think it's oxalic. Well, tomatoes are nightshades. It's one of the nightshades. Nightshades have a certain type of chemical into them, especially when a chemical in them, especially when it's green. And therefore, that chemical is poisonous. That's why it's called a nightshade. Tomatoes, for your information, they come from South America originally. And when the English, they found them in North America, they imported them to England. Unfortunately, they didn't know how to eat the tomato, so they offered the Queen Elizabeth, or I think Victoria, maybe it was Victoria, they offered her the first tomato to be eaten in England. Unfortunately, they didn't know it was the red thing that you were supposed to offer, so they offered the leaves to her. She ate the leaves, she didn't like them. So there was no pizza in England for a long time. Or it's pasta or whatever. Lasagna. But they're nightshades, so the problem with tomatoes is they're extremely acidic. So if you're pitta especially, don't eat a lot of tomatoes, especially the canned tomatoes, because canned tomatoes, because they're so acidic, they burn the metal on the can, and they assimilate the metal into them. So that makes it even more heavy and acidic. Then on top of that, their seeds are indigestible, so they irritate the linings of the intestines, so they become poisonous in that way also. Is anyone Italian here? I mean, I don't want to commit offense or anything. But tomatoes they're nutritious though. Even if you die, you'll die healthy. The other nightshades are potatoes, especially the green. When they're green, that green part is poisonous. Eggplant and bell peppers are nightshades, which means they have a tendency to get this particular type of acid in them, which is poisonous. Green tomatoes, the green part of the potato, green part of the eggplant. Pitta is hot, light, and oily. It's principal ingredients, but it's also sharp, liquid, and mobile. Kapha is heavy, dull, slow, cold, oily, liquid, slimy, dense, soft, static, sticky, cloudy, hard, and gross. A lot of attributes. So can anyone name all the attributes of kapha?
Heavy, slow, dull.
Pretty good. You need to write them down. So here's the principal sites of vata in the body. The colon is the principal site, but also in the lower abdomen, the pelvic girdle, the thighs, the ears, the bones, and the skin. Somehow or another, they left out the lungs. The lungs are also one of the principal sites of vata.
What happens to them if you have excess vata?
First, usually accumulates in the colon. That's why we get all that rumbling sound sometimes down there.
In the stomach?
Colon. Ever gas being passed? Especially vata people, or after you travel, you feel like you got part of the exhaust from that you are part of the exhaust, or the part of the exhaust is coming out. So that's the colon. The gas accumulates there. Cause when you're belching or the gas is coming up, that, as I said before, that means that apana vata or vayu is not going down; it's coming up instead. So
It's
not
good if it goes down.
Yeah, sure.
So eating fast,
Yeah, that's one thing. Or try to take an enema. For instance, people have asthma attacks, which is a lot of times it's caused by apana vayu coming upwards instead of downwards. So one of the ways of treating it immediately is to give an enema, so that apana vayu can go downward instead of up. And displace prana within the body. Asthma is usually, anyone here has asthma sometimes? So sometimes asthma attacks means that one is not getting enough prana. That may be because there's a pressure from apana coming upwards on prana, which is giving us the breathing. And therefore, an enema will help sometimes relieve it. Sites of pitta. Small intestines, principal site, but also the liver, the spleen, and the gallbladder, very important. Stomach is secondary site. Sweat, sebaceous glands, blood, eyes, skin, subcutaneous fat, gray matter of the brain. Sites of kapha. Here it says the lungs, but most Ayurvedic books you'll find the lungs are not the principal site of kapha. As a matter of fact, lungs are usually put under vata. But here it's referring to the, I guess the part of the lungs that, what are they referring to? Anyhow, somehow or another they have this, but generally it's the stomach is put here. Lymph nodes, mastic tissue, synovial fluid, stomach, that's really the principal one. And the pancreas, sinus, nose, mouth, throat, white matter, and meninges of brain and the tongue. So kapha usually deals with the gross parts of the body, visible parts. We went over this. Taste and the related organs. Now this is not exact, because in every Ayurvedic book you read, you'll find they have a different opinion of what tastes are related to the organs. Now the only ones that I think they usually agree with is that salty is, there's a general agreement, it is related to the kidneys. In Chinese medicine, the kidneys have a lot to do with sexual energy, vitality. Qi, or qi, is stored in the kidneys, especially old qi. Therefore, it has a lot to do with one's vitality, sexual vitality. Stringent is usually agreed with the colon. Now, sweet, in most books, will be equated with the pancreas. While sour will be equated mostly with the liver. And pungent, mostly with the heart, or with the heart. Bitter, here they have this pancreas, liver, and spleen. This is just a different way of looking at the whole thing.
What would you say bitter ties to?
Well, bitter counteracts sweet. In that way, because it counteracts sweet, they have it tied in with the liver, which is affected most by sour. So it's just a way of looking at the same thing in a different way. In other words, bitter will calm down the liver. Therefore, it's related that way. But sour will aggravate the liver. Similarly, sour will aggravate the pancreas and the spleen. Or sweet will aggravate the pancreas and the spleen. And bitter will counteract the sweet taste. So bitter sometimes is equated with the heart, bitter heart. But here it has pungent. So pungent will generally dry out the intestines. So this is the way, there's a positive and the negative way of looking at it, how it's related to the organ. So here he has related, because sweet will, obviously won't help the thyroids, the upper lungs. But it has a relationship with them. The lungs are generally equated with vata. The bones, the lungs, and the large intestines are equated with vata. And therefore they're more they're more influenced by pungent, bitter, and astringent. But in that way, salty, sour, and sweet will tend to counteract the effects of bitter, astringent, and pungent. So just a different, instead of the positive, they're sometimes looking at it as a negative way. This is kind of like the way that it gets soothed, modified or soothed. Taste effects. Taste effects on the mind and emotions. So sweet, love, satisfaction, desire, in excess, desire, attachment, need, passivity. Salty, mental ease, mental, in excess, mental rigidity, greed, addiction. Sour, mental acuity, in excess, envy, regret, resentment. Pungent, ambition, motivation, in excess, hatred, anger, jealousy, and aggression. Bitter, mental clarity, insight, in excess, grief, delusion. Astringent, optimism, well-being, and fear. Oh, optimism, well-being, and in excess, fear. Taste and emotion again. Sweet, satisfaction or satiation. The sweet taste of success. Isn't that right? When we're successful doing something, we feel sweet. But on the other hand, overindulgence in sweet leads to a negative aspect, complacency, and greed. Eating too many chocolate bars, one feels cloyed. Is that the right word? Cloyed, when you can't move, you feel very lethargic. Yeah, that's an English word, cloyed. Sour, searching outside oneself for things to possess. Sour grapes, wanting something. Sour enhances the mind's appetite for evaluating things with a view to determining their desirability as possessions. Just like in salads, what do people add a little bit of lemon. It increases its digestibility and desirability to eat the salad. Overindulgence in evaluation leads to envy or jealousy, which may manifest as deprecation of the thing desired as the sour grape syndrome. In other words, if you love something, you don't have to evaluate so much. In fact, and then when you start evaluating it, after a while you start wondering why you're loving this thing. So too much analyzation will lead eventually to criticism. And that criticism will lead to sour grapes. Salty, zest for life, which enhances all the appetites. So salt to taste. You've heard that before? You put on enough salt that it tastes good. And what happens if you put on too much salt? It becomes unedible. So just the right amount of salt gives zest to life. And salt a little bit gives taste, a little bit more becomes unedible. And if you add too much salt, salt actually becomes an anemic. It means it causes vomiting. So if you want to induce vomiting, just take enough salt, put it in water, and drink it, and you'll vomit. Add some turmeric though, so it doesn't agitate your intestinal, your linings of the esophagus. So overindulgence and zest leads to hedonism. The craving for indulgence in all sensory pleasures that are available, just as an old salt or a salty dog will do when he enters port again after a long sea voyage. So is salt a very big taste within our society? Yes, salt is also that emotion of indulgence. So our society nowadays, modern society, they are trying to induce the salty taste. Advertisement is usually an attempt to induce the salty taste, that you have to enjoy more. that you have to, if you get up 12 o'clock at night and you want to eat pizza, you go on the internet or you call this the sacred number, and immediately they jump on their motorcycle with a firm determination, vow to be there in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or else you get a free pizza. So at any moment, any time of the day, whatever the circumstances, that there's an arrangement made that we can gratify our desires. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, and that's considered the success of modern society. Those societies where they can't gratify their desires immediately, they're considered what? Primitive. And those societies where there's instant gratification at any time of the day, for better or worse, that's considered advanced. Pungent, extraversion, the tendency to excitement and stimulation, and in particular the craving for intensity. So if you want to get excited, just take some bread and put chilies in it. And eat it. You'll be excited. Stimulated. Here in the West, we don't usually eat so many chilies. But I think in Mexico they do. They eat more spicy food, don't they? And in India and Bengal, I've sat when the local devotees were eating their food, and before they eat, or during when they're eating, they take these green chilies and they pop them in their mouths just like we put popcorn in our mouths. If you ever tasted a green chili, they're extremely hot, but they just pop them in their mouth just like they're eating pretzels or popcorn or whatever. And they're stimulated. Overexcitement and overstimulation lead to, find out, irritability, impatience and anger, pungent language, a sharp retort, bitter dissatisfaction, which produces a desire to change. When you have to swallow a bitter pill, its bitterness dispels your self-delusion and forces you to face reality. Too much disappointment leads to frustration, which confirms your system in bitterness. Grief is bitter. Just like if someone is very depressed, what happens? Their appetite usually goes down. Were you ever worried about something or depressed about something? Did you feel like eating a lot? Usually if we're really depressed or grieving over something, and our appetite, we don't feel like eating. Astringent, introversion, which drags the mind away from excitement and stimulation. Excessive introversion leads to insecurity, anxiety, and fear. Astringency causes contraction, which makes you shrivel like a prune, and clamps, cold, bony hand of fear around your throat. But with that happy thought in mind, I think we'll take a break now. We can all meditate on that cold, bony hand of fear around your throat. How does exercise relate to Аюрвeda? Generally speaking, there are 3 doshas. So Vata, how do you think exercise is done so that Vata will be controlled?
You like breathing?
Controlling breath.
Well, let's just start with the physical exercise. What is the one thing that Vata is usually unmindful, irregular? So exercises that are done mindfully and with some regularity. Just like they have, Vata is usually like things like Surya Namaskar, or the Tibetans They like to do that because it gives a lot of action. They love action. Unfortunately, too much activity tends to dry vata out and exhaust it. So although they're doing it because they like the activity, but it's not usually very good for them to do it too intensively, so much to the point of exhaustion. On the other hand, pitta, what do you think pitta is like when they do exercise? They're also they're intense, competitive, aggressive. They push themselves past as far as they can, compete with others. They're not so worried about the thing that they're worried about the most is that they win the competition in the exercise. They have to be the best, the leader. And kapha, what's their problem? What's that? They don't push themselves enough. They just want to relax and fall asleep, and they want to enjoy the exercise. They don't want to be disturbed. Therefore, the activity, for instance, according to I'm a pitta person, so my tendency is to become too aggressive. While a vata person will have a tendency to become they want to listen to music while the exercise is going. They want their mind anywhere except in their body. They want to get it over, they want to do it real fast. They love the stimulation, just watching it all go by. And the kapha person, they want some relaxed place where there's, people aren't being pushed, and you can do it the way you feel like it, the way like you're inspired to do it. So let's look at some principles. Everyone can come here. The three principles that I explained yesterday are lines of energy. So here, most yoga exercises aim at the spine. This is our spine over here at the front. Anterior is the back, and posterior is the front. A lot of times when some people do this exercise, they're like this. You know, right? They're kind of like, like that. But actually we're supposed to straighten our spine. So it started in Dandasana, where the spine's straight. We're establishing lines of energy. Now, what moves the spine is usually the hands and the legs. It's hard to move the spine without moving the hands and legs. They participate and they move. So we establish lines of energy in the legs. So the legs are, here we have the thighs, the knees, the shins, all lining up with the feet. Now if they were like this, there wouldn't be very much energy in my legs. When they're lined up, then there's energy in my legs. Because there's energy in the legs, there's some, consciousness of what's happening in my legs. Similarly with my arms. Here's my arms here. If they're like this, there's not much energy. They're just anywhere. But here, there's actually prana flowing through them now. Similarly with my spine. Now when I bend, so this is called lines of energy. And I can reestablish lines of energy, increase it by proper breathing. Hard when you're talking. But here we go. Now the next thing is playing the edge. Playing the edge means there's only a certain amount of flexibility right now in my spine. And I can tell you it's rather limited at this particular point. Now, due to my pitta nature, because I'm demonstrating and I don't want to be embarrassed, I can go like this. And it was, wow, look at that. Oh my God, poor that. I didn't even know chiropractor around me. No, so that wouldn't be a very good thing. So instead, if I did it according to my actual flexibility, the first thing in Iyengar yoga, we make the back concave. It took me 15 years to find out what that meant. I took an assessment and then, I finally just figured out. It wasn't the whole back. I thought this was concave. It was the lumbar back concave, but actually they don't want that. They want the They want something different. They want the thoracic part of the body to become concave and the lumbar to stay flat. So there, this is my flexibility right now. Of course, it's a little bit more. So I breathe, and now if I come down, because everyone knows you're supposed to come down in Paschimottanasana, this is where I wind up. Pretty disappointing, isn't it? But no, now I start to breathe. Notice there was some opening, and therefore I was able to go down a little bit further. So notice, because I didn't push myself, when I finally got into the final pose, I wasn't suffering. Because I actually allowed the body to open up, and therefore, I didn't move more than the body was capable of moving, although I could feel it. For instance, even if I do it now, there's going to be a point, now it's lower than it was before, now I feel a little tension. So rather than push my body, now I breathe throughout, using my breath to go throughout my whole body. Allow the body to open up and move as the body opens up. I could have done it a lot slower, it would have been even more comfortable for me. But by the time you get down, it feels comfortable because the body is open and therefore the lines of energy are flowing properly, which is what we want, and the body is opened up by itself naturally. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. So even in the most advanced exercises, if you break it down to the simple parts of it, that's pretty advanced. Let's see what's another exercise. Well, we'll take this one. I've done this for a long time, so I don't know. Maybe not happen. Lower first? No, that's not going to happen. Anyhow, it's been a long time. In any case, even the more advanced exercise, if you follow that pattern, what's more well, take one that looks difficult. So even with there's a twist. This is Marichasana 3. So if you break it down, and you follow the same pattern. That is, you establish the right lines of energy. And then you play with the breath. And you don't force yourself. How do you know if you're forcing yourself?
Hurts.
What's that? Yeah, it hurts. The other thing is you can't talk while you're doing it. Your mind, your first thing is, your mind is just going everywhere, you know. You're not calm, you're not breathing. So all these exercises, when you're doing hatha yoga, first thing to do is make sure you can breathe. If you can't breathe, you've gone too far. The other way of doing it, of course, is to not be so passive. You know, it's like this. I can hang out here all day. Life is good. So that's not good either. So not too aggressive. You know, this type of thing. You know. That's not good either, but nor too aggressive. But the combination of mindfulness and making sure that everything's the energy's flowing the right way. But right now I'm feeling because my leg is actually lined up properly. Therefore, my hamstring, which is in the back of my knee, there's some tension there. And therefore, when I do the exercise, I'll feel the tension, but it's not too much that it's causing some strain. But just enough that actually my knee starts opening up as I breathe into it. So that's the benefit I'm getting from the exercise. So they're just the right mindfulness, the right state of relaxation, the right intelligence, how to find out where the lines of energy are. There's all these poses. And then there are certain principles, just like in Iyengar yoga, which is just common sense. We're doing something like Trikonasana. Everyone knows Trikonasana?
No.
So here the heel lines up with the middle of the arch of the back foot. So I'm going to rotate this thigh. I'll do it from this side. From the inside out. So my thigh, my knee. So there's a line of energy established between the thigh, the knee, the shin, and the middle of my toes. So this thigh is rotating out. So the energy, I'm pushing the energy down here so that my heel is put into the floor. It's pressing into the floor. The mound of the big toe is pressing into the floor. And since my thigh is rotating in this direction, the energy of the skin of my metatarsals on the feet is rotating in the opposite direction. It's like squeezing. So, although the tendency is when the thigh rotates in this direction to pick up the mound of the big toe, the heel comes up, the other side, the outside of the foot goes down. But if I move the energy from the metatarsals in this direction towards the big toe, even though I'm pressing my thigh the other way, my big toe doesn't come up. Now as I come down, notice if I want to open my chest in the front, the way of doing it is to bring my shoulder blades down the back. So that will open the front chest. And since I'm rotating my thigh towards the back, therefore from the groin, I rotate my chest up. So opposite opposite action. And that has like a squeezing effect. So there's so many activities going on, and they're all more or less squeezing each other. It's like a squeezing effect. So the squeezing goes on, and they actually support each other. Just like when my thigh goes in this direction, my torso rotates in the opposite direction. They actually support and balance each other. They allow an opening. Just like when you're going opposite directions with your hands out like this. And if you bring your both little fingers away from each other, it tends to open the chest and the back. Everyone can try that? Do a little exercise. Notice how your chest opens when you take that little finger, both little fingers. Open your palms up. Keep your palms open. And keep those, bring as if two horses were attached to your little fingers and pulling them apart from each other. Notice how automatically your whole chest and your shoulder blades open up. There are many other tricks to this also. Just by moving your little fingers apart. You don't have to worry about your elbows, you don't have to worry about your armpits, you don't have to worry anything. Just move your two fingers apart. Everything else follows. So similarly, if you find the root, in anger a lot of times, he finds the root of the activity and just moves that, the root. So the root is you're moving the groin here, they consider this the groin one way, and the groin with the torso meets in the other way. And you get this rotating effect. Any questions about that? Those are just some principles of yoga. Yeah, that's very...
I do have a question
Yeah.
related to the doshas in terms of if you're going to create a practice, a physical practice based upon what your dosha is. So for somebody who's a pitta and they're, they may want a vinyasa flow. They may want something high energy, but that's not what they need to balance themselves. So creating a sequence to help balance them would include things that were going to calm them down, like a twisting posture, which is calming.
Well, anything that's done as a sequence. In other words, the sequence is the poses. If you're going to do it for a long time, you have to use them. You have to know what the effects of the poses are.
Right.
And you have to know how to do them to get different effects. Just like you can do trikonasana to calm vata, you can do it to calm pitta, you can do it to calm vata. Like if you want to pacify, you can do trikonasana like this, actually. And if the vinyasana series, that will pacify the kapha, because it'll actually get some activity going.
Right.
Or you can do it in a way that will affect pitta, will pacify it. So pitta is pacified mostly by more gentle, longer holds, yeah.
Okay.
Longer holds with more consciousness.
I asked the question because I teach yoga and I am trying to set up sequences for my private clients that's going to be based upon what they need, not on what they say they want me to teach them, but more how can I help them to find the balance. So that's the reason I wanted to take this course, to have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, so just like in pitta, just like if you're going to do balancing exercises are naturally going to affect something like the element that needs balance, which is like kapha, like there. They need more strenuous exercise and things like that. So you can do this, Vrikshasana. So this is a kind of a stable thing. This will help Vata a lot, just by nature, because of its stability, the calmness that you're trying to, the concentration
Right.
that you have to have in order to do it mindfully,
Okay.
because it's challenging. On the other hand, things that are more active, you know, even a Surya Namaskar series for Kapha, you know, where you're doing some kind of Surya Namaskar. Even, you know, something like a jumping or something. That's going to stimulate Kapha.
Right, okay.
So if you know how to do it, you know what poses are generally going to, like, as I said, these kind of poses where you have to concentrate is going to affect, is going to calm Vata a lot, because it forces concentration into the body. And the ones which are non-aggressive or relaxing, for instance, the one that we did, Paschimottanasana, forces calmness and introspection. So these forward bends, especially, going to help calm Pitta down. While the inversion poses, which are more stimulating, will affect Kapha. The head balances, the inversions, generally very stimulating.
Okay, I am very much more clear. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So what kind of routine would you have daily? You would do like 5, 6, 7 exercises in a row?
Well, my daily, what I do daily is, first of all, I do exercises that are going to warm the body up a little bit. And that give us an opportunity. Well, first we do something like this. I do Baddha Konasana. Because I don't have all my props here. We do. In any case, we do something like Baddha Konasana where we're on a blanket. And it's kind of an opening exercise. And then after that, I do another exercise, which is Supta Virasana, with blankets and straps, because, you know, my body's not warmed up, so we don't really try to force the body so much in the beginning, especially. Then after doing this with bandhas for 5 minutes each, then we go into, I do a series of Adho Mukha Svanasana to Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, a series of flow to warm the body up, as well as other things like Utkatasana. These are really warming up poses. Kind of challenging. And then Malasana, just to warm up. And then from there I do a headstand, then I do standing poses. And then from there I go into a series. I alternate every day between forward bends, back bends, and twists with forward bends. And then Sarvangasana at the end, and then Shavasana, and then sometimes Pranayama. So those, just the main alternation I have every day is between forward bends, back bends, and twists.
Can you give more information about what you mean by altering forward, backward?
Well, one day I'll do all forward bends. Paschimottanasana, I'll begin with Jana Shirshasana, and I'll go to Mukha Pada Paschimottanasana. Then I'll go to Paschimottanasana, and then any other forward bends. And then I'll do some twists afterwards. And then the next day I'll do back bends, beginning with Salavasana, Dhanurasana, Bhujangasana, and Urdhva Dhanurasana. Now I have to do Ekapada something. Oh, that's when you have your hands like this, and it's a different pose. It's a more advanced back then. So then I practice those, then I usually do something, to counteract that a little bit. Then the next day, I'll emphasize more, I'll do more twisting, all different varieties of twisting, with some forward bends at the beginning, but then more twistings. So just alternate like that. Those I consider the major asanas I'm doing, the ones at the end. And then I'll complete it with Sarvangasana, with Halasana, and then maybe some other things. And then Shavasana. Anything else? The major thing is just be steady. If you're Vata, regulation is important. If you're a Pitta, don't be so aggressive that you're competing against anyone. And if you're Kapha, try to do something a little more strenuous than you feel like doing. Don't kind of do everything laid back. I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm not going to push myself too much. Kapha should push themselves. Vata should kind of be very careful about what they're doing. And Pitta shouldn't be so aggressive.
What do you mean when you say regulation?
To do it regularly, at the same time, every day. Hopefully it's something like with the same paraphernalia, following kind of a routine, but exploring, a little interesting, adding things on. But at the same time, have some time regularly where you actually do your asanas. Not that I don't feel like doing it today. I mean, I find that a lot, because I did an assessment, so I was going through quite an intensity doing it, trying to prepare for it. So at the end, the mind said, oh, come on, you're finished with it, just relax. And, it would be time, I'd chant my rounds on our japa beads, and then it'd be time to do the asanas, and say, well, why don't you look this up on the internet, this asana, and I'd spend more time on the computer than I would doing the exercise.
How much time do you typically allow per day for your?
Well, I should be doing it because I have to take another assessment next year. I should be doing it an hour and a half. But I usually, with my procrastination lately, it's been usually more like an hour or something, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. That's the rest of our program. I'm usually always late for part of it. So now, we'll show you something about Tai-chi. I'm a little rusty in Tai-chi because I just spent all my time preparing for the yoga assessment. Tai-chi is the same nature, but obviously Tai-chi is going to emphasize, it's more like pranayama, in the sense that it focuses on alignment, but not as much as yoga does, especially the type of yoga I'm doing. But I'll just demonstrate the first part of our yang 108 form, the first sequence. So that's the first two forms.
That was the whole form, wasn't it?
No, that was only the first two forms. The last part is much longer. But it's quite calming. Even your mind wants to wander, it doesn't wander so much. So this is more or less, it appears that it's not as aligned as, say, yoga is, but actually it's quite aligned to certain principles. It's like the very form, this is called pang. So ideally, pang means that your whole body is aligned with the earth. Just like if someone pushes against my arm here, you can push against my arm. As hard as you can. Yeah, because the body is aligned with the earth principle, therefore there's stability. So even you get a whole bunch of people trying to push you in this position, you can try. Maybe someone can try and push him. You won't go very far. Because, without any effort, it's not that I'm making any effort at all, but because the body's aligned. Therefore, even though someone's trying to push you forward, actually what they're doing is they're pushing here, here, here. They're pushing into the earth. It's very hard to push the earth. Okay, do it on this side. So that's part of the, there is an alignment to the whole thing, but it's just different. Everything in Tai-chi moves in curves. All these, they're all just, it appears that my arms are moving when we're doing something like this, but actually my arm is not moving, it's my waist that's moving. My waist is being directed by the foot on the ground. So the energy is coming from the foot through my waist, out, hopefully out through my spine, out through my arms. So it's the arm, it's the foot, the leg that's moving, and it's the hips that are directing, and the energy is being directed through the hands. If you watch the arms are just moving as a reaction to the movements of the waist. They're actually relaxed, the arms, as much as possible. So this moves chi very nicely in the body, because the body is relaxed. Therefore, the energy flow in the body increases. So it appears like it is a martial art. It's a martial art where you're more or less, especially the bottom part is grounded, the top part is relaxed. So because it's relaxed, the arms, they act like a whip. The whip is very loose, but it has a flip. Although for the practice it's like this, but it can also be like that. Move through the waist. So the arm is relaxed, but the waist moves it. So therefore you have the whole force of the whole body in there. But the practice is what we're doing mostly. It's very relaxed. Your whole body, you're relaxed in the upper part of your body, while the bottom part of your body is solid into the earth as grounding, the support. Any questions about that?
Is the Qigong, like the warm-up for Tai Chi, is that going to move the energy well enough instead of learning the whole Tai Chi practice?
More or less, yes. You do the 8 rockets.
8 rockets.
Things like, we do some of those for a warm-up for Tai Chi. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I didn't know the name, yeah.
Actually, in Tai Chi, a lot of the warm-ups are yoga exercises. At least,
Oh, okay.
so, but the same principles are there. Our warm-ups are usually, you can do any kind of warm-up, but, this is a weights warm-up, where you're moving the hips to get the arms relaxed, but the hips moving. Then they do things like well as coordination exercises.
Thank you.
If you wanted to study Tai-chi, would you just, is there a specific type or is every type considered appropriate?
Well, for most of us, the Yang style is the only really appropriate. The other ones are fighting styles. They're much more strenuous. Yang did it specifically for people who weren't interested in just the martial arts, or less athletic.
So Yang style is easily available or just through a certain yoga group?
I don't know. You know, there's usually, if you find any Tai Chi school, they're usually all Yang schools.
No, the DNA on Saturday mornings has a free, you want to just try it in the Sculpture Gardens, I think at 9:30. Dallas Museum of Art.
Any other questions about this? It's a nice exercise because in Perth, where I do it a lot, they have, you know, people there are 80, 90 years old, they're all doing it. You go to, when I go to Hong Kong in the parks, you know, everyone's doing it in the parks. There's no age limit. And the more you get practice on it, it's very relaxing. At the same time, it's grounding. Okay, so now I'm going to change again, go back to my old uniform. Our personality. Now when we talk about our personality, we actually have two personalities. One is personality, which is the result of what's called ahamkar. Ahamkar is, aham means I am, kara means the doer. So that's our material personality. We actually have a spiritual personality, but that takes a very advanced spiritualist to understand who they actually are and what their spiritual personality is. So this personality that we presently have, it's in a state of uneasiness, but we're trying to maintain as much comfort or ease as possible. Now we have a small problem. We're living in an ever-changing world. Not only the world's changing, but our very internal environment called the body is always changing, and therefore it's quite a challenge to find some permanency in a place which is completely impermanent. It seeks the satisfaction of sweet, and will use the other taste to obtain it. So the most permanent taste, the most solid taste that exists is sweetness. The most grounding, the most satisfying is sweetness. And the other tastes, especially as we'll find out next, sweet, astringent, bitter are cold tastes, and sour, salty, and pungent are hot tastes. So obviously, if we want to digest sweet, we have to have some ability to digest, and that comes from sour, salty, and pungent. On the other hand, after eating sweet, astringent, bitter, they help us purify the body of any effects that are not able to be digested properly by sour, salty, and pungent. So we need all six tastes. Their corresponding emotions are also hot or cold. So as we went over the emotions, what's the emotion for sweet? Positive emotions. We want to think positive, yes.
Happiness or
Satisfaction.
satisfaction?
Yes. And astringent, well, let's go. It's hard to think too positively. But astringent, some emotion that comes from astringency. Fear, the clammy bone, around your throat. Fear. And bitter? Bitter balances all the tastes, but in excess it causes grief. The bitter taste of life, the bitter taste of failure. Sour? What is the hot taste of sour? What? Indulgence, yes, that's more salty. Salty is the indulgent one. Sour is more the discriminate. Positively, it helps us discriminate. And too much discrimination will lead to what?
Critical?
Yeah, becoming critical, jealous, envious. The sour grapes. And pungent? The pungent retort. Yeah, pungency will help us become more sharp, heat up our body, but it can also produce irritation. So there are hot expands physical and mental channels, and cold restricts them. So we can say something about the channels right now. There are channels in the body. The energies in the body, they don't move just by chance. We probably know that the blood flows through channels. Probably we may even be convinced somehow that things like the water channels in the body. So we know that there are channels, but there are many channels that are described in the Аюrveda. Some that we may be familiar with and some that we're not. For instance, there are 7 dhatus. So the 7 dhatus, I'll name slowly. One of them is called, I'll give you the Sanskrit first and then the English. So the Sanskrit for the first one is called rasa. R-A-S-A. We'll come back to that tomorrow. So rasa is lymph, chyle, it's the first product of digestion. If the food is successfully digested, it turns into lymph, or chyle, whatever you want to call it. We call it rasa. If it's not successfully digested, then it turns into mucus. Now, by a metabolical process, which is a little complicated, we won't go into all the different metabolical processes. Sometimes one of these, what's called dhatus, the supports of the body, the general support systems of the body, either by one metabolical process, metabolical means a method of transforming to the next dhatu. So the next one is a straightforward one, chyle or lymph, or rasa transforms directly into blood, called rakta. R-A-K-T-A. So obviously, blood flows through a certain channel, and similarly, blood is assisted by other channels. But then blood, rakta, transforms into mangsa. Metis, actually. Metis is first. Metis means muscle. But that's not a direct transformation. That's an indirect transformation through a metabolical process of transformation. And there's a whole science of how it's transformed, and there's more to it than that. There are waste products of each one of these transformations. For instance, the waste product of rasa is mucus. So if there's too much mucus in the body, it's a symptom that digestion is poor on the most elementary level. Then, from mangsa or metis transformed into mangsa or fat. M-A-M-S-A. And from mangsa or fat, it's transformed into maj, M-A-J-J-A, which is marrow. I'm sorry, yeah, that's right. Marrow transformed into asti, A-S-T-T-I, which is bone. Bone transformed into sukra, S-U-K-R-A, / artava, A-R-T-H-A-V-A. the reproductive system. And Artava and Ojas, and Sukra, when they're properly nourished, then they transform into Ojas. O-J-A-S. Ojas is the aura that people have. Your first line of immunity. The aura.
First line of immunity.
Immunity. Cuts out the bad vibes that people give you. Or it gives you tolerance. Ability to keep the mind stable. Therefore not being affected by the agitation, subtle agitations. And each one of these dhatus, we just named 7 of them, they have their channels where their energies to nourish them flow into them, and their waste products flow out of them, and the transformations take place in. So these are 7 shrotas, S-R-O-T-A-S. That's singular strotas. So each one of these dhatus have their own strotas, and then there's a strotas for the malas. Malas means the waste products, which are, I won't give you the Sanskrit because it's not so important, but stool, urine, and sweat are the 3 malas. Then we have the channels for the digestive system, for the gastrointestinal tract, namely for the stomach, for the large intestine, for the small intestine. Then there's a separate channel for the mind, and there is a channel for women have 2 separate channels, for menstruation and for breast milk. So those are some more channels. So, I think that, how many does it make altogether? We got 7 plus 3 is 13. And the mind should be 17.
17 channels.
Yeah, there should be 17. So those are the channels. So hot things will open those channels up, and cold things will restrict them. Hot emotions will open them up, cold emotions will restrict them. The mind actually supersedes the physical manifestations. For instance, if you're very fearful, then what happens to the digestive system, the channel of digestion? It clams up. If you're very angry, what happens sometimes? It opens, actually, the anger, in order to assuage it, then you may start eating more. It's like when people get really, say, an anxiety or angry, then to calm themselves down, they start eating sweets. Yes?
You say ojas?
Strotras.
Ojas?
Ojas.
First line of unity. Earlier on you associated it with kapha.
Yeah, it's the essential part of kapha. Because after all, the digestion starts with the food we eat and manifests itself to a certain proportion. A certain portion of the food that we eat is manifested itself as, we say, rasa. And then a certain proportion of that comes out as rakta or blood. So by the time you get to shukra or artava, reproductive fluids, then that's the very essence of all the food that we eat. And the essence of that is ojas. So kapha, the very essence of kapha, of all the essence of the essence is ojas. So ojas is the essential part of kapha. Because sukra is actually the most essential part of kapha within the body.
So if someone's very low on kapha, does that mean they're more susceptible to have a low level
Yeah, sure. Kapha people who have a good kapha constitution, they're usually not very susceptible to major diseases. But vata people are the most susceptible, and pitta in between. And especially in modern society where they emphasize sense gratification, which reduces kapha, or at least distorts it. The food that people eat, the quality of their, rasa, rakta, monks is so poor. I mean, you can't build big, really first-class blood on pizza and ice cream. And by the time it gets to sukra and artava, the reproductive fluids and reproductive essence, is such a poor quality, and therefore the children usually don't come out very strong. That's one of the reasons why you have such a big increase in, what do they call it, autism? Autism, because the quality of the men and women is become so poor, their health and their mentality. But one thing is that if you're healthy and you eat healthy food and you digest it, then you get healthier. And if you're unhealthy and you don't eat, and then you eat, you get more and more unhealthy. So unhealth, if it's perpetuated, increases unhealth, and real health, if it's perpetuated, increases health. Up to a point, of course. Old age takes over after some time, but you can get healthier and healthier if you live healthier, and you can get more and more unhealthy if you live unhealthy. Because if the ojas is the thing that, just as a sidelight, the thing that takes away ojas, or that removes ojas from the body, the quickest are two things. Unrestricted sex life and anxiety. Uncontrolled sex life quickly removes ojas from the body because it removes the foundation for ojas, which is sukra and artava. And worrying also burns away because it increases, and also burns away the ojas, anxiety, and increases vata. So the symptom of, just like they have AIDS disease, which is just autoimmune disease, which is, dozens and dozens of autoimmune diseases. They group together and they call them AIDS, mostly for economic reason, to get more and more grants. Not that these things didn't exist before, but you make more money when you scare people than if you got statistics backing you up. Everyone's going to get it. You better pay us money or else you're dead. It's a quick way of making money. Not very honest, though. In any case, AIDS disease is principally an autoimmune disease, and part of it is usually caused, well, at least part of some of the immune diseases is caused by unrestricted sex life. Uncontrolled sex life, which removes the essence, namely sukra or artava, from the body, and therefore ojas doesn't form. And when the ojas is not in the body, then we can't retain prana or tejas in the body, because ojas is just like the container for prana and tejas or agni. And because there's not enough fire in the mind of discrimination, therefore we keep on doing the wrong things because we don't know what's actually good for us. We just imagine things that are good for us which are really not. And because the fire is taken out of the body, essential fire, the digestion goes down. And therefore, even if we knew what was right for us, we wouldn't be able to eat properly. Even if we're eating properly, it would be very difficult to digest the food because there's not proper fire in the body. The fire of the mind goes down, the fire of digestion goes down, all the fires in the body goes down, and therefore digestion goes down, discrimination goes down, and because there's not enough fire and digestion, therefore rasa, rakta, etc., they diminish also. Instead, we get waste products and more and the person gets affected because his very body, instead of producing producing the dhatu, starts producing toxins, and the toxins, the body, this defense system, attacks the toxins that are being produced by one's own habits and mind, And therefore the body starts attacking itself, and then you get things like AIDS or cancer or other diseases. Taste and emotion. Cold taste and emotions decrease the organism's desire to eat new things. Hot tastes increase the organism's desire to consume food or other sense objects. So if we eat cold, heavy things, then we'll feel satiated. If we eat things that stimulate the appetite, like ginger or other types of hot food, then our desire to eat is stimulated. Sweet's intense complacent effect increases natural inert, complacent kapha, pulls the anger of pitta, and comforts the fear of vata. Sour's envious effect creates a kapha when envy of another's success incites you to clutch all the more firmly to your own belongings. Otherwise, pitta will increase as jealousy mutates into anger over the raw deal you feel you are getting from life. Envy can help reduce your vata by focusing and heating up your consciousness. Salty's hedonism increases complacency as long as you're able to indulge, which increases kapha. It increases the fieriness of pitta's anger whenever there's any obstruction to your gratification, and decreases vata by allaying fears of inadequacy or inability to properly indulge. Pungent increases pitta by actively increasing the flow of hormones and digestive juices, making it easy both to digest, to manifest anger. It relieves kapha by decreasing self-satisfaction, and temporarily relieves vata by facilitating expression of bottled up emotions. In the long run, however, pungent increases vata by exhausting the organs and glands. This dries you out, limiting your ability to project aggression or unhappiness outwards. Bitter is the best of all six tastes. As Dr. Basant Lad likes to say, bitter is better. In small amounts, bitter helps balance all other tastes in the body. In the same way that mild dissatisfaction with yourself or your situation impels you to change. Bitter dilates channels that are too constricted, thus reduces kapha and its complacency, and constricts those which are too dilated, thus reducing pitta and its anger. Overuse of bitter increases vata as dissatisfaction and continuous change produce insecurity and fear. Astringent constricts, drawing one away from the self-satisfaction of kapha and the self-aggrandizement of pitta. Its constriction increases fear of insufficient sensory nutrition and leads to increased vata. We are encouraged to consume as much as possible hedonistic lifestyle, the salty taste. So that's the main taste in modern society. And it's one of the main things that is stressed, that we have to consume. If we want to be a good person, we have to make money and buy things, keep the economy going. Use your credit card, get into debt, spend. And that's called the salty taste, because the idea is we're going to enjoy. We compare ourselves with others and see they're better off than us. So no matter how much I spend, someone else can spend more than I can. So they're enjoying more than I am. I got a raw deal out of this whole thing. I become envious. So that's the sour taste. Impatient to gratify ourselves, pungent taste turns into anger, frustration. So now we're all heated up. We're good Americans, good or whatever, good in modern society. It's worldwide nowadays. We're now heated up, ready to consume and digest physically and emotionally. We're ready to go out and spend, make money and spend. Your unfulfilled desires alike create bitterness in you if they result in dissatisfaction. So we're spending, we're trying to gratify ourselves. We can't get as much as we want, therefore we're bitter. Bitter in small doses is a tonic for appetite and digestion. A little dissatisfaction can spur you on to greater and greater appetites. Excessive bitterness overstimulates vata and disturbs your mind as you brood over your state. Sweet is used to reduce the situation. So here comes sweet to the rescue. We're all fired up to enjoy, we're not enjoying the way we want to, and therefore sweet comes.
When you say sweet, do you mean actually you take sweet food?
Well, any kind of sweet things that may give us some satisfaction. Going out and spending money with a credit card is kind of sweet, you're in control. Or, you know, sweet food. Something that gives us some kind of satisfaction or sweetness. Mostly it's food, and on the subtle platform, it's, you know, buying things, getting a new house, a new car, everything new. New gives us like a kind of sweetness that we actually are getting what we want. Our desires are being satisfied. But on the food level, just like you go to a modern fast food place, and at least in the book that I read at the time, which was only 20 years ago, he wrote it, he said that 50% of Americans, 50% of their diet is fast food. So the bun for the hamburger is sweet, the ketchup is, well, they have put on hot mustard to heat you up, and the salt is there on the potatoes to make sure you're heated up, and the sour ketchup is so now you have the sweet, you have the sour, salty, and pungent, and you're all heated up to enjoy the sweet and bun, the sweet potatoes, and the sweet, well, I don't know, I guess you could call it hamburger. But the more you eat, the more you're eating salt, pungent, and sour, the more your digestion increases, so you never feel satisfied. But you're being satisfied to a certain extent by eating the sweetness of the bun and the potatoes and whatever else you're eating inside there. And so you're getting a little satisfaction, but you want to eat more and more and more. So until your digestion breaks down and you get sick. The popcorn, they have a special chemical in the popcorn, so you get absolutely no nutrition from it, but the chemical causes you always to hanker more for the popcorn. So you can endlessly eat the popcorn and never feel satisfied, besides all the salt they put on it to stimulate your appetite. Because what the body is really looking for is real satisfaction. That is the digestion of real sweet, which is nutritious. But if they give you something sweet which is not nutritious, just empty sweet, then you taste the sweetness, but you never really feel satisfied. So your body never feels satisfied. So it's starving actually. So it's hankering for more sweet, and you keep on adding more sour and salty and pungent to stimulate the appetite. So you just keep on eating more and more sweet that never really satisfies the body. So they make more and more money, and you get sicker and sicker as time goes on. But that's all right, because that keeps up the gross national product, because a lot of the gross national product is for the hospitals and the medicines. So you're really helping America by getting sick, because you're increasing the gross national product. And even if you die, then they make money from the burial. So then you're actually helping increase the gross national product. Although you may be miserable and you die, you know, in pain and suffering, but you're a good citizen. So here's a little look at our tongue. This is not my tongue, by the way. We took a picture of someone else's tongue. So on the tongue, there are different places on the tongue, just like in the body. There are different places for sweet, sour, salty, and pungent. even you can tell either on the tongue or people's eyes, or the body is just in many, many different places, or by taking pulse, you can understand what the position is or the situation of these different tastes. But when we eat food, when we judge something as astringent, this is the part of the tongue that recognizes something being as astringent. Similarly, sweet taste is in the front, sour is on both sides. And as you notice, according to his conception, this is a picture from Prahladananda's book, that here he has actually, this represents looks like, the lungs. So he has sour and the lungs coupled together, but we usually put over here he has bitter for the liver, but I usually put sour for the liver. But as I explained, bitter will modify the liver. In any case, this is where bitter is tasted, this is where salty is tasted for the kidneys, pungent for the intestines. Anyhow, any questions about this? You do have to stop somewhere. Probably a little bit of information to chew on.
Well, with like dry skin or, slow digestion, I mean, just eating foods that, like for the digestion, the fire, the spice, to kick that in, balances.
Well, we have to know what we're doing.
Right.
But that may, if we do something mild, it's probably, there won't be so much problems. The problem is when we, taking heavy medication, trying to be your own doctor, but experimenting a little bit with these conceptions, like a little bit more spice here and there, and seeing what the effect is.
Day-to-day society, quick fix.
Yeah, if we're not into, pop the pill and everything's all right. So to experiment a little with the conceptions, the spices, the diet. Usually, if we're really sick and we want to find out what's good for us, we should cut out all our food and just eat one food for a while. And then start adding food. Maybe fast for a day, and then add one food at a time. Eat one food for a few days, and then add a food and see what the effect is. And we can find out what we're allergic to. Anything else? Okay, so I think for today we'll stop here, and we'll start again at 10 o'clock tomorrow. So thank you very much.